God of War is a series known for its tragic yet compelling journey, its savage combat, and maybe most notably of all, it housing one of video games' most iconic protagonists, Kratos. Him and his journey have become one of the series' most defining features, it being one of relentless vengeance and inner turmoil. That was earlier on, however. Transitioned over to God of War 2018 and its sequel, God of War Ragnarok, released in 2022, we have this grandiose epic scale and cinematic storytelling with the uniquely done over-the-shoulder camera that follows Kratos' every move, making the experience feel ever so more personal, like we're some sort of invisible ghost spectating all of his actions. A ghost of Sparta, one may say. I'm sorry for that one, my bad. In the newer God of War games, Kratos' character undergoes a profound transformation from the once vengeful Spartan warrior to a more complex and heavily introspective figure, one who has grave regrets about his actions in the past, seeking to become a better person and a better father for his son Atreus. The two of them journey through a whole new setting, featuring new characters and a fresh new lineup of gods that would intertwine with Kratos' journey in one way or another. Fast forward to the end of that duology, however, and we get this extremely touching moment between the both of them before they part ways, leaving Kratos by himself once again. Well, not really, as he has Mimir with him, and Freya, and the Valkyries. These are all people who believe in him and the goodness within, which is very important for Kratos underneath it all. This is where we get to Valhalla itself. On the 8th of December at the 2023 Game Awards, the DLC for God of War Ragnarok was announced, and it's safe to say people were hyped. Very hyped. The reality that it was releasing only 4 days after being announced, combined with the fact that it was free and a roguelike, had everybody, myself included, losing their minds. It was an actual genius move on Santa Monica Studios' part, as since it was releasing before Christmas and the holidays, whilst being free to play basically ensured that a majority of their fans would be tuned in. What we wanted was more Kratos, however, and I'm sure that I'm not alone when I say that because this was a free DLC, I wasn't really expecting anything particularly mind-blowing. I couldn't have been more wrong. The story was incredible, a well-written look into the deeper psyche of our protagonist as he reflects on his journey, his life up until this point, and it serves as a fantastic character study for Kratos. The gameplay was surprisingly compelling. As someone who's had very little experience with the roguelike genre, I had a great time here and found myself enjoying the combat more than I actually did in the base game itself. Not to say that the base game's combat was bad or anything, far from it, but I found it more engaging here, and I'll get to why later. This video will be structured into 2 parts, the gameplay and the story primarily, and why each make God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, that's kind of a mouthful, I think I'll just stick to saying the DLC of Valhalla. Brilliant. I hold God of War 2018 and its sequel Ragnarok in very high regards. They are some of my favourite games to come to the PS4 and PS5, and I treasure them close to my heart, blah blah blah, you get the gist. With that being said, however, the gameplay isn't an aspect that I'd particularly describe as masterful. It is pretty good, don't get me wrong, but I never felt myself being too invested in its intricacies because, well, I never felt that I needed to. It is kind of nitpicky, but if I had to give a mild complaint for the modern games, then I'd say that their combat needs to feel more evolving. I want to get more attached to each of the weapons. I was always more of an axe guy in the duology, pulling out the blades and the spear occasionally when I wanted to make use of their runic attacks. This is, of course, a personal issue, and like I said, I was being a bit nitpicky. But with the release of Valhalla, however, I dare say my nitpicks have been resolved, as the roguelike elements made the combat and gameplay a standout in my opinion. Now, before we go any further, I'll be the first to say that I'm not an expert when it comes to the roguelike genre, so I may sound a bit amateurish when speaking about the gameplay aspects of this DLC. So when Kratos actually enters into Valhalla, there's a condition that's tied to it. That being that he has to forfeit all of the upgrades that he has for his current arsenal, meaning a fresh roster of weapons and inherently reducing all of his stats to level 1. Forcing you to build yourself from the ground up over and over again. This is awesome in my opinion, since it forces every run, each exploration into the pits of Valhalla to be in some way, shape or form unique. What type of playstyle will you be made to adjust into the next run that you make? What combinations of runes, glyphs and upgrades will present themselves to me this time? The sheer variety in approaches that you're going to have going forward makes dying seem a little less of a detriment than usual. This also means that you won't always be given the abilities that complement your favourite weapons, so making yourself at home with the movesets and combos of the Blades of Chaos and the Dropnir Spear helps a ton, as there definitely are times where you'll be forced into making use of them primarily for the entire run. Now, since it is a roguelike, most of your abilities, upgrades and whatnot will disappear the moment you eat the big one, and yeah, you will be forced to return to zilch, so base weapons, stats and currency. Currency? You haven't said anything about currency. Oh, my bad. Well, there are two types of currency in this DLC that you'll be tasked in managing. The first being fleeting echoes. These are your basic currency that you get by killing enemies and smashing the occasional pot or two. They can be spent within Valhalla itself to upgrade the specifics that are tied to your playstyle, whether it be your glyphs or runic attacks, or even to replenish your health and rage to carry on with throughout the rest of your run. Fleeting echoes can be found very easily. They're simple and quick enough to come by. However, there's another more interesting type of currency that can be gathered whilst making your way through the various realms. It's quite a bit rarer and is called mastery seals. These seals can be found through chests or via defeating the various mini-bosses scattered throughout. More reliably though, they can be obtained through mastery quests, which are optional challenges that the player can partake in, and if you're like me and enjoy going for trophies, then I'm sure that you'll complete a fair share of these quests. These mastery seals are great because they are permanent. They stick with you even if you die or complete a run, and it allows for you to purchase upgrades outside of Valhalla, upgrades that persist throughout each run which you can't lose when acquired. Do you want more health or rage for the rest of the DLC? Go for it, you've earned it. Do you want to increase your stats like runic or luck to strengthen your combat encounters? Be my guest. Are you having a tough time with the more challenging foes deeper in? Maybe buy a resurrection stone that'll allow you to get back up after death once every run. Heck, you can even secure yourself some fleeting echoes for the start of every run to smoothen the process out even more. These purchases are permanent and it's a fantastic element of roguelites. The sense of getting stronger on a fundamental level, gaining some sort of progress after trudging through the gauntlet of enemies that was thrown at you is amazing. Now, it may be confusing upon your first time as to whether or not you're making any actual progress through Valhalla itself. You keep coming across the same areas over and over. Am I actually getting anywhere? Well, yes, in fact, and the way to do that is by defeating mini-bosses called Valhalla's Chosen. These are more beefier enemies that will naturally give you more trouble on your runs, as they are Valhalla's Chosen. Why it chose this chimpanzee looking thing, well, your guess is as good as mine. Anywho, if you're looking to venture on further, then best be prepared to slay the obstacles that block your path. Once you beat these enemies, then Valhalla branches out a little. At the start it was quite linear and straightforward, but once you take out... I'm sorry, but Valhalla's Chosen is way too dramatic of a name for these dudes, man. Back on topic. Once you take them out, then more branching paths become available for the player permanently. Every now and then, when you enter a new realm, you'll see not one, but multiple doors that you're able to go through. You have the option to choose with the guidance of the symbol that's placed on the front of these doors. Sometimes you can even just say screw the branching options and head straight for the mini-boss, marked by the ominous skull symbol. Or you can choose a door that may give you another glyph or a refill on your health and rage. The choice is yours. The main emphasis about roguelites and the DLC's gameplay as a whole is that your choice, you can choose whatever you want. Something will always be different, and there'll always be something new waiting for you. Once you progress up to a certain point and reunite with a familiar face, you obtain a new rage. It's called Legacy, and it's the freaking Blade of Olympus. I lost my shit after the classic L3 and R3 prompt showed up on screen and Kratos swung this out of nowhere. It's a similar feeling to the one I had in God of War 2018 where they gave us the Blades of Chaos for the first time. Such an epic moment. The moveset is great and its fluidity and efficiency is awesome. I'd personally take it over Ragnarok's Valor and Wrath rages, and the personal sentiment of using one of the strongest weapons from classic God of War is amazing. It's not to be understated. It's so fucking good. One thing I was worried about before playing this DLC was how out of touch I would be with the game's mechanics in general. I had a whole year's worth of gaming downloaded inside my brain after finishing God of War Ragnarok, and I had just come off a very intense Dark Souls 2 playthrough, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. When I first came back to this game, I constantly pressed circle to roll, when actually it was X. But other than that, it was shockingly easy to get back into the gist of things. I also noticed a similar unease among some of the community when the DLC was announced. A lot of people were troubled at how accessible the gameplay would be to them as returning players. I'm glad to say, however, that it's still extremely easy to slide back into the flow of things once you get the ball rolling. I played the game on normal difficulty, but it does allow the option for you to reduce said difficulty if you're having a tough time dealing with it. There's virtually no detriment to doing so other than earning rewards at a reduced pace, but other than that, no penalty whatsoever, which is great. Another thing about this DLC is the central gauntlet stage. After a certain point in the story, this becomes a large part of the combat. A lot of the time will be spent here as you'll be tasked with defeating a lot of damn enemies before you get to duke it out with the main boss itself. Once you reach this stage in the run, you'll be given a responsibility to defeat a certain number of Valhalla's chosen, a number that rises upon each successful run completed. There's also a caveat that you need to be aware of. There's a coloured bar at the top of the screen that indicates the difficulty of enemies that you're encountering. The colour of the bar gradually shortens as time goes on, and each time the bar completely depletes, the difficulty increases. Here's where you'll experience the bulk of your combat encounters, and it's where my opinions on the combat as a whole formed in a more cohesive manner. The simple yet complicated style of fighting presented in God of War makes the whole endeavour quite warm and welcoming to experienced and returning players alike. To be honest, it's very impressive and downright confusing how this DLC got me to utilise more of the game's combat feature in the 8 or so hours that I invested into it compared to the 50 that I had in God of War Ragnarok itself. Overall, the combat and gameplay itself in the DLC was excellent. I had a ton of fun diving deep into its mechanics and intricacies, its variety and diverse approach. The many facets on offer provided for a deep and engaging partner to explore alongside the story itself. Speaking of which, let's get onto that, shall we? So as I mentioned earlier, the final events of God of War Ragnarok led to Atreus' departure from his father Kratos, and in the current time it's just Kratos and Mimir now. After receiving a mysterious invitation from a mysterious someone, they both depart and head for an interesting location that ends up showcasing itself to be Valhalla. For those of you who are aware of what exactly is so important about Valhalla and what it really is, well, Valhalla is essentially the realm for those who are supposed to be dead. The brave warriors within would prepare for a greater task ahead of them by either enjoying a feast, honing their skills, or whatever else. The question that arises to mind though is, how the hell is Kratos able to enter into Valhalla if he is alive and well? It is also supposed to be guarded by Freya and her council of Valkyries, which puts further emphasis on Kratos and Mimir's taboo way of entry. There is a condition that must be followed when Kratos enters. He has to give up all his upgrades for everything he has, reducing his statistics to level 1, which I mentioned about earlier in the gameplay section. So I still think this is a genius way to weave together the gameplay and the story in a seamless way. It provides a legitimate reason as to why we have everything stripped away from us upon entry. Normally I don't mind when games don't explain why some gameplay aspects happen, because it's a game. I'll just accept that I'll respawn after I die, or that I'll be made to use a certain approach when forced upon me. It's been conditioned within me to just adjust to whatever the game wants without much reason. In Valhalla, however, the story reasoning is much appreciated, and the connection between the gameplay and the reasoning makes the experience that bit more valuable in my eyes. So 10 points to Gryffindor. Initially, as the pair of Kratos and Mimir venture, their goal is to discover who it is that sent them the invitation. Who could have possibly invited them into this sacred realm? What could they want with them? Are all the questions that are running rapidly through the minds of the two. The letter itself reads,
Kratos of Sparta, you are hereby invited to a challenge. Face the past, face the future. Master Valhalla, master thyself. And then directions here. No signature.
With some big brain critical analysing skills, it's apparent that this means that Kratos will be embarking on a journey that'll delve into some tough self-reflection for the man himself. If you've played through the modern duology, which if you haven't, then why are you on this video? I'm sure you're well aware of the lengths Kratos would go through to hide his past from Artorias, how uncomfortable he becomes when the notion of the acts he's previously committed is brought to the forefront, and it's very understandable. How many of us have been there when something we view as shameful in our past gets brought up? We just cringe and try to bury that event in the annals of time. Now think if the things we did in our past were even on the same wavelength as murdering hundreds of innocent civilians, then yeah, I can kind of see where Kratos is coming from when he tries to avoid the subject of his past. When we first entered, safe to say it wasn't the conventional method of doing so, presented to us by the curse that affected Kratos as well as him being only allowed to use his axe with a smidgen of health. After dying once, yes, it was meant to happen in return in God of War fashion, you awaken on the shores and this time you're greeted by Freya and some of her Valkyrie companions. Yeah, I don't think she was happy with us. Nonetheless, after speaking with her and the Valkyries for a bit, we prepare ourselves on journeying back within. It's made clear that the trek going forward would be one that's personal, one that may be a mental and emotional struggle, but one that Kratos would need to see the end of for the sake of himself. Now the way Valhalla works is quite interesting in of itself. Essentially your mind is accessible for Valhalla to use at its own will. This is going to be a weird comparison, but bear with me. Think of Minecraft creative mode. All the blocks that you have available to you are from Kratos' own mind and experiences. Anything from his past and present, whether it be enemies or areas that he's traversed through, can show up in Valhalla whenever it pleases, and it can either help you in figuring out what's going on or can stand against you and prevent you from progressing onwards. With all that in mind, Kratos ventures back in, properly this time, so the burden of the curse isn't there to weigh him down any longer. Another point of interest is mentioned with Mimir on our new journey into Valhalla, one that pertains to Freya and the conversation she had with Kratos prior to him walking through those doors. She's building a new team for the realm, and in an effort to prevent anything even remotely close to Ragnarok from happening, she's requested that Kratos becomes the leading force of that team, the God of War. A role he's familiar with and a role that he's known quite intimately. Who better to go with than the man who won Ragnarok against all odds, the man who strives to become a better person day in and day out, and the man who's experienced so much battle in his life. Kratos, however, is extremely doubtful in his abilities to be the right person in charge, and he makes it very clear to Mimir how he feels about the proposition at the moment. Back in his time at Greece, Kratos was infamously the god of war and was known for his savagery amongst other dishonourable notions, and he fears that becoming the current god of war will slowly turn him back into what he was, tarnishing the immense effort he's put in from that point to become who he is now. Both Freya and Mimir are aware of his past, but they believe in his goodness. They see past that and can put their trust in him to make peace across the 9 realms. Kratos, however, doesn't seem to share that righteous opinion of himself. As, well, the saying goes, no one knows you better than you know yourself. A lot of people struggle with how they are in the current, and it comes in many forms. This is often expressed mentally through self-depreciation and a general loathing attitude towards themselves, as they know the full picture and they believe that they're unable to change. What's worse is that their biggest fear is that others may see them the way that they see themselves. And if you've played through the modern duology, then you can clearly grasp that line of attitude from Kratos, mostly when he speaks to Atreus, like I mentioned earlier. He's terrified that the facade he's trying to uphold might slip and that Atreus will see him for the ruthless and despicable person he believes he once was. Kratos' whole journey throughout God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok has been one where he's really trying to come to peace with himself. One massive attempt to bury the past and step into the new light as a different person to who he once was. But on this journey, Valhalla's mission is to get Kratos to essentially take a step back for once, to observe the character he was before arriving to Midgard, to face himself once and for all. This, being the first time we do head in the direction of backpedaling, makes for an extremely powerful and impactful journey to embark upon. One where he has to try again to rid himself of the shackles that hold him back, the torturous mindset that he imposes upon himself. One where the end goal is to come to terms with who he was and who he can be going forward. After progressing through a fair bit, Kratos opens a door and sees a familiar looking throne. Upon questioning Mimir about it, we don't receive the usual cheerful voice we know and love. Instead, a different one we haven't heard in years, yet it sounds so strangely familiar. It's after that Kratos gets a headache and is forced back to the shore. Freya questions if our business is finished, but no, it's far from over, so Kratos with Mimir heads back into Valhalla and ventures enough to get back to the throne he saw. This time, however, the voice speaks to us first, and we see its face. It's certainly a face we know, a distant nightmare, a blast from the past. The sun god Helios. He becomes a replacement for Mimir in some sections of this campaign. A rather annoying one, mind you, as he constantly enjoys egging you on and trying to rile that latent bloodthirst within Kratos. Well, the way Kratos took him out in God of War 3 was particularly brutal, so I don't blame him for being a bit of a nuisance. That man had his head physically ripped out of him. Like, damn, that's one way to go out. There's a ton of callbacks and instances where classic God of War gets brought up in some way. Valhalla's surefire way of reminding Kratos of the deeds and characteristics that he once harboured. The Chamber of Sacrifices from God of War 1 appears at a point and the subject of how Kratos cold-heartedly sacrificed an Athenian soldier. Not to mention the goddamn Blade of Olympus that I touched on earlier. There's other little things that hammer home Kratos' Greek roots, and I've seen some people say it's a bit too fanservice-y, but honestly that doesn't bother me in one bit, like not at all. In fact, I see it as a masterful tool used to enhance the storytelling a lot. It's a way to expertly develop Kratos' character while also paying homage and respect to the Greek saga and its many fans. After the hour or two that you've already synced into this DLC, I'm sure you're still wondering who the hell sent that invitation. Well, I think it's about time we find the answer to that question. After trying to sacrifice Helios and that backfiring on us due to Valhalla and its twisted way of messing around with Kratos, Kratos offers himself up. In a metaphorical sense, it's like a layer of him deeper within is being sacrificed, but in a more physical manner, he's burning, and just as he's about to fall, he gets sent to what seems like the very top of Valhalla itself. Kratos looks bewildered before turning around to see a very familiar face. Tyr, the real Tyr, not an illusion or imposter, but the one and only god of... Jesus Christ, that's a lot of titles. Tyr was the original god of war in the time where Odin hunted the giants, so it's clear that Tyr knows the weight that comes with such a title. In a kind of related yet unrelated note, can we just talk about how tall this guy is? Wow, he towers over our boy Kratos. It's almost like Kratos is in some middle school club and Tyr is coaching him, which I guess isn't too far off from the truth, right? He's willing to help us to ease the suffering as Tyr has been in the same position. He's been through the process, he's put in the work. Acting as a mentor with the end goal being to send Kratos through those doors and beyond to allow him to sit on the throne with no regrets. To do this though, we must fight him in combat, multiple times on several different occasions. This was a great twist that was thrown out of left field but was very welcomed. I didn't speak about them in the gameplay section because I was saving it for now, but wow, are these fights awesome. We finally get to see a Tyr in action and it did not disappoint. The various tools, weapons and abilities and even armor he showcases throughout these battles were epic as all hell. Speaking on the weapons he uses against us, firstly he uses a spear and shield, probably the most well known of his arsenal and the tools that he used in his march against Ragnarok. If you notice in the image I showed for a split second earlier, amongst the dozen god titles that he holds, the god of law and justice are also titles that Tyr owns himself, and so the shield and spear are a fantastic way of showcasing those titles to us. Another weapon he uses is the Makwa Huitl, hopefully I said that right, which he must have grabbed or had it graciously gifted from the Aztecs, another far off land. This is a weapon that's highly engraved in the Aztec culture and is kind of a combination of both a club and a sword, and it's badass to go up against. Once you return to him after your second successful bout, Tyr will pull out a pair of Khopesh, which may I say look absolutely amazing. He dual wields these curvy swords that must have been borrowed from ancient Egypt, further deepening Tyr's combat prowess and arsenal. These weapons in particular also give Tyr the unique ability to shun lights from part of the arena, leaving only small parts to fight in. Perhaps powers from the Egyptian sun god Ra. Well, last but not least is the extensive looking katana, presumably from Japan, a symbol of courage and worthiness. This weapon completes the kit of tools that we see Tyr showcase to us throughout this campaign, and it is deadly. There are times when in use where Tyr will shout and will split himself apart to give the illusion that two of them are attacking you. Well, Umhuksen translates to reflection in Norse, so only one of them is real and flesh. All in all, the Tyr fights are one of the highlights amongst many other things in this DLC, and at times really tested my abilities as a player. Getting through the whole run of Valhalla just to fall at Tyr, the final hurdle, did sting a bit, I'm not gonna lie. But the whole experience of seeing Tyr as a fighter and him duking it out with Kratos tooth and nail just to get to the end and him stop our assault with his bare fist is undeniably badass. Even the nods to Aztec, Egyptian and even Japanese mythology has me speculative and extremely excited for what's to come in the future for this series. Other than the fantastic gameplay and boss fights that we've been having, after each of these successful attempts, revealed to us were various memories that plagued Kratos' mind in one way or another, from his pact with Ares and how that cataclysmically changed his life, to the dynamic he shared with Helios, how he beheaded him and drained the sunlight from Greece because of it, all the way to even Pandora and the story of the blacksmith and the box that he so desperately didn't want Kratos to open. to finally his sacrifice that was meant to result in his eternal slumber, but alas was not meant to be. All of these things he reflects upon and says how he would have done those things differently, but he is aware and is coming to accept the decisions that he's made in the past and is willing to learn from those experiences in the past to better himself in the present. This fight did something else, however. Beyond the thrilling battle and spine-curling look back through his life, it's been preparing him to walk through those doors, ready to see it through to the end, and walk we do. Once past, we see Kratos, the younger Kratos, the prideful Kratos, the arrogant Kratos, the Kratos who made him into who he is now. Look at him, he already looks bored of sitting there. The scene that plays out is one filled with so much detail and heart, so much emotion and hardship. Kratos speaks to his younger self and manages to convey to him every emotion possible with his subtle mannerisms and changes in tone, all thanks to the god tier voice acting from Christopher Judge. It's a scene that really connects to me and many of the fans, an incredibly powerful and cathartic moment with many callbacks including that of Hope, the words of Pandora. Not word for word but close enough that I instantly was able to make the connection, as her line about hope was one of my favourites from God of War 3. He admonishes his past self, berates him about his choices, and you can even see the younger Kratos reacting to the words being said to him, fixing his posture, paying more attention and straightening his face. It's like in school when you were getting told off and you weren't taking it seriously before the teacher would start shouting at you, then you would sit up and be like, oh shit, okay. Kratos even acknowledges his younger self as one who was always more than what others said, accepting him and truly realising he was always more than the vengeful, heartless god that many made him out to be. This scene is so unbelievably well done and impactful. Honestly, it's one of my favourite moments in any video game ever. That's how much it touched me. Once the emotions dry up a little and Kratos has finished his monologue, the throne stares back at him, empty, waiting for someone new to take his reins. Kratos does just that and decides that the negativity that tormented his mind would have no control over him any longer. He accepts his role and becomes the god of war, and maybe even more importantly, a god of hope, closing down this saga with outstanding quality. Wow, what a DLC everybody. This really did so much to elevate my already amazing opinion of Kratos and really displays the legendary character development that he has. The alignment between its roguelike gameplay and storytelling structure, putting a tail end to both the Norse and Greek saga, made this a home run, and I still can't wrap my head around it being free. Yes, free! Santa Monica Studios, I love all of you there and I can't wait to see whatever you have next for the series. That's all from me folks. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, share it around, comment your thoughts, and lastly, subscribe for more videos as I'm back on the grind once again. I've been your host Adobo. This video has been a pleasure to make. I hope you all have a great day and I'll see you in another video. Peace.
Hope is what makes us strong. It is why we are here. It is what we fight with when all else is lost.